I've been doing a lot of reminiscing lately, and obviously a huge part of my childhood was the Five Nights at Freddy's series. I remember being obsessed with these games ever since I first discovered them in around late 2014. I remember being too scared to play them and getting all my information about these games from YouTube thumbnails and word of mouth. Once I finally got the courage to play the games, I loved them, and I got pretty good at them. I started to lose interest in the series around 2018 because some other games took the spotlight, Fortnite, but ever since 2020, I've sort of gotten back into my FNAF phase, as much as I hate to admit it. I love watching analyses on YouTube about the games and hearing about people's thoughts on the games, but one thing that I've noticed is that the first one, in my opinion, isn't talked about nearly enough. Now, I know that sounds crazy because it was the first game and it's what made them popular in the first place, but I feel like because of its age, or maybe because it doesn't have a ton of confusing lore details to break down, or it doesn't have 50 bazillion characters, it's kind of fallen between the cracks in comparison to the other games. People think about it as just the first game, the game that started a franchise. But to me, it is the franchise. To me, it's the best execution and the heart and soul of everything that Five Nights at Freddy's should be. To me, the other games are sequels to Five Nights at Freddy's, not part 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever. I do think that the sequels are necessary, but only really for story purposes. Everything else about the game is nearly perfect in my eyes. The gameplay, visuals, story hints, and audio all blend together to make a masterpiece of a game that unfortunately gets overlooked, because the characters are not easy to make into fan art. The horror of the first FNAF game is some of the best in the series, mostly because it doesn't try too hard to be scary. The atmosphere and characters are designed to be uncanny and unsettling, not outright terrifying, and this produces what is, in my opinion, far better quality horror. The sound design of the game is incredible. The harsh droning of the fan, the metallic and ghostly ambience, the heavy footsteps and general clattering happening throughout the night, and of course, the heart-stopping jump scare sound effect. Once again, it's not over the top, it's realistic, and just enough to put you on the edge of your seat. If you want an in-depth analysis of the sound design of the Five Nights at Freddy's games, I definitely recommend that you go watch Scruffy's videos on the games and their sound design. They are incredible, and I'll link them in the description below and in a pinned comment. Another thing that makes the game terrifying is how random the animatronics can be. On the later nights, if you accidentally stay in a camera for too long, or accidentally don't look at the cameras for too long, you can flip your monitor down and get a jump scare that had no warning whatsoever that it was about to take place. This creates powerful suspense, to the point where even though I know the mechanics of the game very well, I still feel very on edge and scared of making a mistake every time I play the game. Altogether, the visuals, audio, gameplay, and concept blend together perfectly to make a very nerve-wracking experience. One of my favorite qualities about the first Five Nights at Freddy's game is just how much more realistic it is than the other games. The animatronics usually look like something that would be in a Chuck E. Cheese location in the 90s, and that adds to the horror a lot. All of the camera footage looks very realistic and uncanny, and the animatronics almost have a clay-like texture to them, and it's very off-putting, as they fall into the uncanny valley of almost looking too real. In the second game, the characters almost look 2D in the cameras and on screen, and I think this is mostly due to limitations in ClickTeam, which, in case you didn't know, is the software that Scott uses to design the games. This is an advantage of the Five Nights at Freddy's games that have less characters, because Scott can put more effort and quality into the characters that are there. I'll talk more about characters later though. Another way that Five Nights at Freddy's 1 is more realistic is that the story isn't overly complicated and doesn't require you to suspend disbelief quite as much. All that is hinted to in the first game is that murders took place in the pizzeria and that the building and the animatronics might just be haunted by the souls of those dead children. The possession thing is only really hinted to in the game, but your imagination kind of fills in the blanks in the hints that are provided. One thing from the game that always stuck with me was the visual of Chica being at the door right outside the window. I don't know why, but the way she sits there with her mouth open and something about the way she looks is so real. I touched on this a bit in the previous parts, but one thing that I think is tremendous about this game is the characters. Is it just me, or are the characters in Five Nights at Freddy's 1 just a lot more memorable than the ones in games like FNAF 2, Sister Location, and FNAF 6? That could just be nostalgia talking, or maybe the fact that they were the first original 4 that the rest are based off of. I'm not quite sure, but they're obviously inspired by the Showbiz Pizza and Chuck E. Cheese animatronics, and they work because it takes something innocent that you recognize from your childhood and twists it into a nightmare. They genuinely do look like something that you would see in a Chuck E. Cheese style establishment. One thing I've noticed about the animatronics that creates another element of horror is the fact that they can look a bit like clay or even puppets in the cameras, and some people have a fear of claymation or puppets because it's kind of a form of zombification, like it's something that's dead, it's something that should be lifeless, that has kind of been given life, but it's fake, and that's really unsettling to some people, and I'm one of those people who finds it unsettling. Another great thing about this game is the character count. It's just a fact that when a game has a lot of characters, they won't be quite as fleshed out or developed as the characters in a game with less characters. Imagine for a second if Springtrap first appeared in the games with a simple design, think Funko Pop style or something like that, and he was just one of 11 other animatronics in Five Nights at Freddy's 2. It does what that character could have been a huge injustice. Since there are only 4 animatronics in the first game, Golden Freddy, I'm not going to count him, and since these 4 characters aren't in any way derivatives of existing designs, Scott was able to make these characters the very best and as memorable as they possibly could be. I'm not going to dedicate too much time to this portion of the video, but I have to include this, because the way Easter eggs are done in this game is completely different to anything in the other games. The hallucinations showing wide-eyed or empty-eyed images of the animatronics with the message "It's me" are such a creative and great idea for a horror game. Also, the small chance of the walls in the West Hall to change to have crying children, or the poster in the West Hall corner becoming a picture of Freddy ripping his head off, they just add so much to the feeling that something is off here. There's a small chance of Bonnie to look right into the backstage camera, or all of the masks in the backstage and the endoskeleton to look straight into the camera. And of course, Golden Freddy, who is the definition of my fear of claymation and puppets. The way he looks so alive, but so dead at the same time. So lifeless, yet he just came into my room all by himself. All these Easter eggs fall into the analog horror category. The way the low-quality, staticky cameras reveal things that imply that you're being watched, or that something is trying to communicate. Even with the Easter eggs, in the first game, just like everything else, Scott knew not to overdo it. And even though I would like to see some of these hallucinations and Easter eggs to be just a bit more common, too little is much better than too much with these kinds of things, because the rarity of them just serves to make them even more interesting and special. In conclusion, I think that the first Five Nights at Freddy's game is nearly perfect, because it's very realistic for a horror game. The audio and visuals make it terrifying to play, the characters are horrifying and memorable, and the Easter eggs add rare instances that are just icing on the cake. All of these things reach their fullest potential because in this game, nothing is overdone, and overdoing is something that seems to plague the rest of the series, especially in this day and age with Security Breach. Every visual falls into the uncanny valley, every sound adds to the atmosphere, and every Easter egg reminds you that the pizzeria, and maybe even the game, is haunted. And that's why Five Nights at Freddy's 1 is perfect.
Hey, you made it to the end of the video. Most people don't make it that long. I mean, they moved on to other things. I'm not implying that they died. That's not what I meant. Click on this video right here to hear about the cutscene that changed FNAF 2, and go subscribe to Scruffy and Prostra. They were a huge inspiration for me to make this video, and I think that's everything. Oh no.